This society will always be as a drunken of the wine. Controlling all the senses for understanding great divine. I will send fire to this land.
This is your brother Gabar, and we are live, and this is Man Going God's Way. Are you fit to go God's way? Let's go. All right. Thank you for your applause and your introduction, allowing us to get to your room, into your living room for the Shabbat, or the end of the Shabbat, towards the seating of the sun. Brother Ricky, how we doing today? How's everything?
Doing well, man. Can't complain. Ready to go.
Another day in Babylon. Okay. So I'm pretty excited today about today's conversation because we are going to be tackling a subject that's been a long-waited conversation in regards of biblical interpretation. And I think the way to control the people is to control what they read, what gets interpreted, when something gets translated from one language to the next, in this case, Koine Greek, ancient Hebrew into modern English. The people who are actually translating these records have an enormous amount of power, right? An enormous amount of control of the mindset of what people are going to think, what went down 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 6,000 years ago. That's a lot of power. That's a lot of prestige, authority, and so forth, so on. And I believe that we need to put our people into our into this institution to make sure that we can actually control the narrative, right? And compete the narrative, right? So before we start, I want to make sure we're coming in clear. Give us a thumbs up. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe button to make sure to help the algorithm, because we are going to go live today. Shalom, Brother Big, Brother Ra'ai, he's doing his thing, and we be big. Make sure you should like and subscribe to his channel. He's doing a lot of good interviews. He interviewed me a few weeks back. That is there. So please support the brother. We have to support each other, so forth, so on. So let's get right to it, right? I want to bring this PowerPoint into your living room today. And this is something that I've been working on this whole past week. I was, juggling, going to the jiu-jitsu school, going to work. I have this little tablet that I could, it's all connected to my computer. So if I adjust something in the PowerPoint, it will be adjusted on the one that you've seen today. So every time I had some time, I was trying to adjust it because I was trying to bring as much information as possible. And I was trying to not cut any corners and so forth, so on. So let's attack this issue today, right? I want to attack this issue because we've been talking about this within the Hebrew community in regards of what does the word means, mia sabbato, right? Mia sabbato, which is a Greek term. Mia means one or first, depending in what context you're using it. Or it means one or first, and Sabbaton means, of course, Sabbath in Greek, right? The first of the Sabbath, or first Sabbath, or one Sabbath, or one of the Sabbath, right? Most of theologians, I won't say most, because now that's turning now. People now are looking at these in translation and are questioning these translations, right? So let's go into the PowerPoint, So I like this quote from Daniel Gregg. It says, and then this is actually, I took this from a paper he put together that he tackled this same subject. And he's like, of course, a Christian and also a researcher and so forth, so on. And he said the first thing that Christians need to learn is that dictionaries and lexicon are propaganda pieces. That stuck with me. Like, that is true, because think about it. If you go to a lexicon, you perceive that this lexicon has expert opinion, the facts, what is known to be true. When you go to a dictionary, what's the definition of a word, right? Let me find the etymology of a word, right? And so forth, so on. So can somebody use these dictionaries, these lexicons to try to mold the mind of people? We need to look into that. That's why healthy discourse is good. It's healthy, right? We have to challenge the powers that be, or the teachers and the people that are teaching us our own history, right? Our Bible, our record. So I wanted to start this PowerPoint with this statement, which I felt is you will have a better understanding of the statement at the end of this PowerPoint. So let's continue. All right. So today I want to focus on many things, but one of the things I want to entreat people or educate people, enlighten people on these translation. I love the Jubilee translation. I started coming across around a few years. This translation, I think I have seen, is one of the best translation I have seen just yet. I will even say it's better than the King James. And I said, I'm sorry. I love the King James. But the King James, it's old English. It's 330 years old in regards of communication. So it has to be updated. There are, I believe, some mistranslations in certain things. And this is not something that is unique into academia. A lot of the translators or a lot of these so-called experts are saying, yeah, the King James missed the mark in certain areas, or the words that they were using at that time is outdated or needs to be updated. That's why you have the New King James, the New Revised, the Modern King James. You have different formats King James, because the further we get from Old English, the harder it is for us to understand that Old English, because it's old. It's no longer being used, right? So, but it's a great translation because it's a word by word. But I also like the Tyndale. I like the Great Bible. I like there's other great Bible as well that should be credited. And many brave men went and translated these records under great pressure, under prosecution, under Tyndale got killed. A lot of these people got killed and murdered and hanged for the translation. So let's read a little bit on this translation for people to get educated, and we're going to move on. Brother Rick, if you don't mind.
Okay. And just one thing to add. Before you were speaking about how the guy said that dictionaries and lexicons or hit pieces, or propaganda pieces.
Yeah.
But people to understand what he's saying is this: if you go to a Webster 1872 Webster dictionary and look up the word nice really means stupid. So when you tell somebody that's nice, you actually tell them that that's stupid.
Right.
But then but I remember when I was a little kid, the teachers used to speak to us and be like, the word ain't a word. But now you go in the dictionary, the word ain't is in the dictionary.
Yeah.
So it lets you know that when that man made that statement, if you think about it, it's actually true.
Right. And it is a thing that words in society evolve. So what used to mean something one generation, 2-3 generations later, it means something else, like the word nice. That's nice, but it really means, back then it meant it was stupid or silly or whatever. The word gay meant happy. Now it's used for someone who is a homosexual. So it happens all the time, right? So absolutely. So let's pick it up real quick. I want to just get people in line with or educated with this translation, because they really went into it, and also the Reina Valera, also another within the Latin community, and they translated the Jubilee Bible in Latin. So my Latino brothers, make sure you get this one is this hard copy as well, right? So let's continue reading, or let's start
The
reading.
Jubilee Bible 2000, about the Jubilee Bible 2000, translated from the original text in Hebrew and Greek into Spanish by Casiodoro de Reina, 1569, and compared with the revision of Capriano de Varela, 1602. Based on the New Testament of Francisco de Enzinas, 1543, and on the New Testament, 1556, with the Psalms, 1557 of Juan Perez de Pineda. This material was translated from Spanish into English by Russell M. Stendhal, Slovakia, and compared with the Old English translation of William Tinsdale, Pentateuch of 1530, Ploughboy edition, New Testament of 1534, Joshua to Second Chronicles of 1537, and Jonah. It was compared word for word with the authorized version by King James of 1611. Translated from the original text in Hebrew and Greek into Spanish by Casiodoro de Reina, 1569, and compared with the revision of Capriano de Varela, 1602. I believe it's saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's in, it's in, okay. Yep. I'm sorry. Okay, so look up this Bible. I think you should get a hard copy. If back in the day they used to kill people if they translated the Bible without the permission of the Catholic Church. Now they can no longer do that. So now they have to control the minds and bring people like James White, who has a non-credited PhD. He's just PhD is a legal term that you have to go through certain process to get that title. And this dude just went around the corner and got this uncredited PhD. So don't believe these guys. They are these experts and so forth, so on. So now, since they can't kill people anymore, now they're trying to control the minds. So get yourself these other translations. Get the people, find out who translated these different translations as well, and why, right? So we're going to read, right, and we're going to attack the first day of the week. Now, most people, when they read these scriptures, they would, let me just go here real quick. And let me go here. Let me go here. Let me go here. Okay. So most people, when they read these scriptures, they would see something like this, right? Now, the end of the Sabbath, and as began to dawn towards the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, right, to see the sepulchre, right? And then there was an big earthquake. The same thing with Mark, right? And when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, the mother of James, and Shalom, and they bought spices, so forth, so on. And I think further down it says verse 2, it says, "And very early in the morning, the first day of the week," right? Luke said the same thing, right? Upon the first day of the week. John said the same thing upon the first day of the week. Okay, so let's attack this because I want to read this version because this version read a little different. But we need to understand what is they saying because it took me a while to understand. So I did a little research on what this means, first of the Sabbath. So we're going to attack this today. So brother, if you don't mind reading.
All right. Matthew 28. Now well along on the Sabbath, as it began dawn on the first of the Sabbaths, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And when the Sabbath of the great feast of the Passover was passed, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him.
Right. So, my friend, read verse 2. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. And very early in the morning, the first of the Sabbaths, they come unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. So
we do know that they came in the morning, rising the sun, right before the sun, it was still dark, but the sun's, it was with that twilight morning, right? And so I'm reading the Jubilee Bible. You could get this from BibleGetWeight.com. It has these translations. The Blue Letter Bible does have different translation, but doesn't have a lot of the translation. Or it should have more, in my personal opinion, but it kind of is one of these things. So shalom, brothers, shalom. We have B Spice, Lady P, shalom. Your always support, Brother Tommy. Okay, I see you, brothers there and sisters. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your support. Thank you. Okay, so let's attack this. So I was like, okay, what this means? I because if they're translating it, this is not a raw word by word, because sometimes if you translate a Greek manuscript straight into like every word that you see in the Greek in the raw form, sometimes it would not make sense. It would look too blocky, block. So this is not what they did here. So I was trying to figure out what does it mean first of the Sabbaths, what they were talking about. So in the Mark version of Jubilee Bible, right, Mark 16, it says that when the Sabbath of the great feast of the Passover was passed, they added that. That's a commentary. That's an added addition to make the reader understand. So therefore, which they are correct, because after Christ got crucified during the Passover, and we're going to get into that because there's different debates on that, when that Passover was. You got some people that believe that was Wednesday sundown. Other people believe that, it was Tuesday. So we're going to attack that. But one thing we want to today, we want all the brothers that believe in the different calendars. I want all of us to, hopefully, my hope after this lesson is that all our calendars will agree that Christ was crucified and buried Friday sundown on Nisan 13 going into Nisan 14, or Abib. If we could lock that in, we could crush this Sunday worship. Right? So even if you believe that Christ kept the Passover on, and we're going to attack that with some experts and people that have done research on this, which there's argument for both, so to be fair. But all the evidence point that he was crucified on Friday. And if we could all agreed on that, now we got him. And I want to show you why. Okay, so let's continue reading, right? So let's go to I want to go to the next one. Luke and John says the same thing. Now, upon the first of the Sabbath, very early in the morning, they came into the sepulchre, bringing spices with them they had prepared, and certain other with them. Now, a lot of, there were men there too. The women are mentioned, but there were men there too, because in Israelite culture, women were not allowed to touch a man's body, dead or alive. So they came in with the sepulchre, holding the sepulchre. I mean, the spices, but it was actually because they brought in sons and other men with them to actually perform the actual spices and put in preserving Christ's body. People may ask, because they were keeping those traditions still, right? John 20, right, verse 1. The first of the Sabbaths, plural. Mary Magdalene came early when it was yet dark unto the sepulchre and saw the stone taken away from the sepulchre, right? So they all said the same thing. But what this term means, first of the Sabbath. So let's, and of course in Mark 16. Now, let's read this commentary real quick. I agree with this commentary. All the evidence points to it. So there's no reason to deny this. But the word there in Mark 16, Mark, the oldest marks that we could find ends Mark 16 at verse 8, when the women ran away and they told Peter. All the early script, the later script has 9 through 20. So this is really the universal belief of the book of Mark, chapter 16. Brother Rick, if you could read that, if you don't mind.
All right. Mark 16 is the final chapter of the Gospel of Mark in the New Testament of the Christian Bible. Christopher Tuckett refers to it as a sequel to the story of Jesus' death and burial. The chapter begins after the Sabbath has ended, with Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome purchasing spices to bring to the tomb next morning to anoint Jesus' body. There they encountered the stone rolled away, the tomb open, and a young man dressed in white who announces the resurrection of Jesus, 1 through 6. The two oldest manuscripts of Mark 16 from the 300s conclude with verse 8, which ends with the women fleeing from the empty tomb and saying nothing to anyone because they were too frightened. Textual critics have identified two distinct alternative endings: the longer ending, verse 9 through 20, and the unversed short ending, or lost ending, which appear together in 6 Greek manuscripts and in dozens of Ethiopic copies. Modern versions of the New Testament generally include the longer ending, but place it in brackets or otherwise formatted to show that it was not part of the original text.
So when you read Mark 16, right? So let's kind of go to Mark 16 real quick. Let me go ahead. Boom, boom. Okay. So let's read Mark 16. I'm reading the King James Version. And Brother Ricky, when you're ready.
All right. Mark 16:1. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome had brought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. And they said amongst themselves, who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. And entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were affrighted. And he said unto them, be not afraid.
No, I'm sorry. Keep reading it because it stops at 8. Go ahead. Keep reading. I'm sorry. My apologies.
Okay. And he said unto them, be not afraid. Ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen. He is not there. Behold, the place where they laid him. But go your way. Tell his disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him, as he said unto you. And they quickly went out, quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed. Neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid.
Okay, so that it ends there, right? But go away, tell his disciples and Peter that they go before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him as he said unto you. So the worldview is they came Sunday morning. While it's still dark, the sun was about to come up. So you cannot even count the day Sunday, right? It's really half of Sunday. If you're going to, first day, because the Hebrews count sundown to sun up. So you got Saturday night, that will be the first day, or half of the first day. Sunday morning will be the starting of the next 12 hours, right? Because there's 12 hours in the day, there's 12 hours in the night, right? Or 12 parts is divided into 12 parts. So therefore, you can't even count Sunday because all of that already happened. He's not here. So if you're going to use a Sunday model, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning, right? of Friday sundown, then Saturday sundown, and then Saturday night at around 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. That's when they were in that area. They were in the sepulcher. You cannot even count the day because it already happened, right? And they have gotten into a great deal of an explanation. Well, you know, when you count the day, when you end the day, you can count the entire day, and the Hebrews used to count the day. If you end the day, they count the entire day. That may be true, but Christ says what? 3 days and 3 nights, 72 hours. You cannot get 72 hours. And there's been a problem in many of the Sunday worshiper issues. They have to explain this, right? But I'm saying that, right? So then what the experts are saying is that from 9 all the way to 20 is a retelling of Christ's story. And this was added later. And there it looks plausible. So let's read to show you that it kind of the story stops there and it kind of starts over again. So let's continue reading at verse 9.
Mark 16:9. Now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils.
But then you show that it's repeating the same story. It's kind of like retelling what just happened. So the scribe added this. But this is what's very interesting. This is the only place in the Bible that the word Mia is not there. Do you know which word is there, Brother Ricky?
No.
The word is, let's go to the Strongs. The word there is not Mia. Mia is not 4413. The word there is
Strong's G, 4413. Protos.
So this is very interesting because now this says first in place or first in time or place, right? And succession, right? So first rank, all of that, right? Okay, chief, right? Okay, so what did the scholars knew? What now? The word there, it was added, right? It was. You could see the word "they" there. It's not part of the original writings that was added. So it's saying the same thing. First, Sabbath, because the word week there is Sabbath. Now it's actually putting the word first. They put this much later, right? And let's continue reading because it goes into like a summary of what everything that happened.
All right. Mark 16:10. And she went and told them that had been with him as they mourned and wept. And they, when they had heard that he was alive and had been seen of her, believed not. After that, he appeared in another form unto 2 of them as they walked.
This is recording the book of John. Remember when he's kind of disguised himself? And they were like, hey, why are you weeping? Hey, you haven't been in Jerusalem? Did you know that Christ was the Messiah and they killed him? And remember that story? That's in the book of John 20, right?
Right.
And you guys could read this on your own. It's kind of, and this is the place where the Southern Baptist folks got this whole thing about read 17. Matter of fact, we could start at read 16.
All right. Mark 16:16. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. And these signs shall follow them that believe. In my name shall they cast out devils. They shall speak with new tongues. They shall take up serpents. And if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. They shall lay hands on the sick, and they shall recover. So then after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven and sat on the right hand of God. And they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word with signs following. Amen.
So all this is true, but Mark never wrote this. This came in much later. This is a summary according to the evidence. Okay, so I just wanted to just go into that in regards of Mark, because this is where they get this from. So the word there is petro, which is fine. I believe that the word mia, which usually means one, was properly translated as the word first in the first of the Sabbath, or as they say, the first day of the week. But they should have kept the word Sabbath, and they should remove the word day because it was never there. But what does the first of the Sabbath plural mean? We're going to get into that. Okay, so, all right. So another place, the first of the Sabbath is mentioned. Princess, my cat is going crazy. Hold on.
Oh,
It says, I think she's getting old and she's like passing the next, so she's like crying to God. I don't know what's the problem. She's been with us like, I don't know, 12 years, 15 years. So it's been a while. My daughter found her as a little baby in the street, and she's like, oh, let's take her. And my wife couldn't say no. And then one day I come home and like, what's this little cat doing here? I was like, oh, we found the baby, it was dying. I was like, all right, let's keep it. But all right. So Acts 20, right? The same thing is mentioned, right? But there is a pattern with this statement. This statement is only mentioned between Passover and Pentecost. I hope you guys are putting all the pieces together. This statement is always mentioned after the Passover and between the Pentecost. And let's prove this, right? So let's read this real quick, brother, if you don't mind.
all right. Acts 20:6. And we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came unto them to Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days.
So they took them 5 days to get there, but they stood there 7 days, right? And they left after the feast, or after the days of unleavened bread, or the feast of unleavened bread, right? Let's read.
Right. 7. And the first of the Sabbaths, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart the next day, and continue his word until midnight.
And continuing his word until midnight. And then when you go down to verse 16, right? What it says, go ahead, brother, read. I'm sorry.
For Paul had determined to sail by Ephesus, not to detain himself in Asia, for he hasted to keep the day of Pentecost, if it were possible for him, in Jerusalem.
Right, because 7 weeks after, 7 Sabbaths, right, is the feast of Pentecost, which means penti means 50 in Greek, right? So pay attention. Right. Let's follow the pattern here. Also in the book of 1 Corinthians 16, right, is also mentioned. Right, let's read.
All righty. 1 Corinthians 16. Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I have given orders to the congregation of Galatia, do ye likewise. Each first Sabbath, let each one of you set aside in store, as God has prospered him, that there be no collection when I come.
What is this word for Sabbath? It keeps saying that, right? It keeps saying that. And when you keep reading down in 1 Corinthians 16, on the here, 1 Corinthians 16, verse 5. Now let me just go to here before I go there. Why was Paul emphasizing in the book of Corinthians? Because when you go in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, he was rebuking the Corinthians because he was collecting money. And they were refusing, or they were, hesitating. And he said, we give you spiritual things, right? You should give us, if we give you spiritual things, you should give us carnal things, right? The reason why, because there was a famine happening in the world, and they needed to take care of the church in Jerusalem. So let's read this real quick. We're in Acts 11:27.
All right. And in those days, prophets came down from Jerusalem unto Antioch. And one of them named Agabus stood up and signified by the Spirit that there shall be great famine throughout all the world, which came to pass in the days of Claudius Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
Then the disciples, each one according to what he had, determined to send relief unto the brethren who dwelt in Judea, which they likewise did, and sent it to the elders by the hands of Barnabas and Saul.
And Saul. So when you're reading Saul, aka Paul, writing to the Corinthians, saying, listen, when I get there on the first Sabbath, but we know now that that is during the time of what? Passover, because when we read Acts 20, it gives you the okay, this is telling Paul's story. This is now 1 Corinthians 16 is Paul writing to the Corinthians in his story, or the story that Acts is reporting. Now it's like 1 Corinthians is the epistle that Paul wrote. Acts is the journey of Paul traveling to different churches that he wrote to and visit as well. That makes sense, right? So when you go down to 1 Corinthians 16, it says, verse 8, but I will tarry at Ephesus until Pentecost, right? Now, matter of fact, let's go and let's continue reading 1 Corinthians 16, if you don't mind.
All right.
You can start at verse 3.
All right. 16:3. And when I come, whomever ye shall approve by your letters, them will I send to bring your liberty unto Jerusalem.
Why? Because he needed to go to Jerusalem because there was a famine. So remember, they sent Barnabas and Paul. Go collect the funds for us to preserve the church in Jerusalem, which Peter and James was running. Right? And that's what was going on. So all this is bringing this thing to life. Right? And I think, let me see here. Yes, let's read Acts, right? 2016, if you don't mind, brother.
All right. Acts 20:6. Oh, 16. For Paul had determined to sail by Ephesus, not to detain himself in Asia, for he hasted to keep the day of Pentecost, if it were possible for him in Jerusalem.
So all this was happening. He was running around writing letters to churches in advance, say, hey, listen, when I get there, do this, do that, so forth, so on, right? When he was collecting the tithes and offerings and the free will offerings to help the saints in Jerusalem. That's why he hasted to go to Jerusalem in the day of Pentecost, because that's when you present the new fruits, the new offerings, right? So every feast days had its significance in regards of release and helping the high priest. But now it's no longer the high priest of the Levites. Now is the apostles. They're the high priest. They're in that position, the Melchizedek order now. So a lot of the things that was given to the Levites now are given to the priests of the Melchizedek order, that you could be of any tribe, right, within that order. So things were changing, but this is showing you that the church were keeping the feast of the Most High. That makes sense? All of that was connected, all of that, right? So I want to just keep reading, but I want to go back to this first Sabbath. What is this first Sabbath talking about, right? Okay, so this is a graph, and I've shown this before to show you. So 1 Corinthians, right, was written in 57 AD, and it happened Acts 19 and 20. So we could clearly see in Acts 11:27, that's when the brother came out with the prophecy, hey, there's going to be a famine. So but the actual event in regards to the Corinthians happened after that, right? Him visiting the churches, collecting funds, right? Correcting them. That's why when he told, now all of this makes sense in Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6. It says, for Christ, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let's keep the feast. Because they were doing, all this was happening around the feast day of Passover unleavened bread. And we're keeping these traditions right there in front of our faces. Okay, now let's attack Luke 16, because I believe the Luke 16 answers what does it mean first of the Sabbath. Mia Sabbaton. Let's read this real quick if you don't mind, brother. Luke 16 verse 1. Okay.
All right. And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first that he went through the cornfields, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands.
So this word here is G1207. Deutero Petro. Deutero, it comes from the Greek word Deuteronomies, like the book of Deuteronomy. It's like a mixture, because the word Deuteronomy means two or to do over. So it Deutero Petros, which means second first. And this is what you read when you go into, this is from the Blue Letter Bible. This is what you hear the second of the first Sabbath after the Feast of Passover. The second after the first Sabbath. Pay attention. After the first Sabbath. What is the word first Sabbath? How will you translate this in how will you say this, Brother Ricky, in Koine Greek, first Sabbath?
Mia Sabbaton.
Thank you. We're getting closer to the mark, right? So let's read real quick Leviticus 23, verse 15, right? Because if you search the scripture, it's going to give you the answer to all your questions. The problem is that they had used the lexicon and also these dictionary to misguide the people sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. You have to be very careful, right? So let's read Leviticus 23, brother, if you don't mind.
All right. And another thing, I had looked up a couple of things, and another understanding of Sabbaton was Sabbaton is known as a high holy day versus Sabbath is just strictly Sabbath. So when we don't know that those two words do mean the same, but they are different. So when they say the second Sabbath, really they should have put the second Sabbath after Sabbaton, and that would have cleared that up.
After the high, thank you. You're getting there. You go. We're gonna get there. Yep. We're gonna get there. So let's continue. Right, Leviticus 23, a book of we're reading from the Jubilee Bible 2000, which is a very good translation. I recommend it. It says the same thing with minor differences. Correction, I believe, from the King James. Let's pick it up at verse 15, brother, if you don't mind.
And ye shall count unto you from day after the Sabbath, from the day that ye offer the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Unto the day after the 7th Sabbath, ye shall number 50 days. Then ye shall offer a new present unto the Lord. Ye shall bring out your habitations 2 waves loaves of 2/10 deals. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They are the first fruits unto the Lord.
They are the first fruits. So I put a draft in the bottom, right? 1415 of Abib, Nisan, first month of the year, Feast of Passover / unleavened bread, first week, right? The first Sabbath after the feast of, so this is at the end of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, because we remove any leaven from the 14th to the 21st of the month. So the 14th, which is Friday, right? Friday sundown, which is the beginning of the 14th, the end of the 13th. You throw everything out at the 13th, which is the preparation day, or the day getting things ready. And then Friday sundown, you start eating unleavened bread all the way until the next Saturday sundown. So really 8 days if you do the calculation, right? So let's continue, right? So this is what you will see in your typical encyclopedia, International Bible Standard Encyclopedia, second Sabbath after the first. And this is what they say, because there's different theories in what this means, right? So just to be fair, because I don't want to come across as being biased to show you guys. Well, I am a little biased towards the Sabbath for the Most High, but I want to show you that there's other arguments, because this only happens once in the scriptures. So Scott and that statement is not found in secular ancient Hebrew Israelite literature, so it's hard to determine what it means, and which is fair, right? But this is what is usually is argued and what it is. Let's continue reading.
All right. Sabbaton, Deuteroproton, Luke 6:1, literally the first Sabbath of the Revised Version margin. We will mention only a few of the explanations elicited by this expression. It was the first Sabbath in the second year of a 7-year cycle comprising the period from one sabbatic year to the other.
So there's a theory that's what it could mean, to be fair, right? There's another, continue reading, brother.
2, the first Sabbath after the second day of Passover, i.e., the first of the 7 Sabbaths, the Hebrews were to count unto themselves from the morrow after the Sabbath, the day after Easter, until Pentecost, Leviticus 23:15.
And that's where I stand. I believe that's the best angle, because when you line up all the scripture, it all makes sense, right? So let's continue. Third, and there's a fourth. Go ahead.
3, the first Sabbath in the Jewish ecclesiastical year, about the middle of March, the first Sabbath in the civil year, about the middle of September, being counted as the first Sabbath.
That's another theory there. Go ahead.
4, the term deuteroprotos is a monstrous.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but because if you're dealing in September, that's the fall. I don't know, and I have to do some research because I'm not a farmer, and especially in Israel. And we need to even, there's some new data that is coming out that Israel may not be Israel, or the Israel that we know today. So, and I'm not saying it is, but these days nothing surprises me. So, but whatever Israel happens, right, is known that it has 4 seasons, right? When you go into the book of Jubilee, it has winter, it has fall, it has summer, it has spring, right? So therefore, and you do have a winter in Africa. It does snow in Africa in certain parts. So, but that's I don't want to digress, because I got some information from Brother Joseph that sent me who is in Africa, that we may have to look into that. Right now, the reason why I don't agree with the third one is high likely because September going into that is dealing with the Jewish people called Rosh Hashanah. With their New Year starts in around September, around that time, because that's like the season or the holiday season. The way they call it. So, but just to be fair, this is different theories, and since we don't know for sure, we have to present all the different theories, right? But I believe the Bible gives us the answer. But go ahead, brother.
4, the term deuteroprotos is a monstrous combination of the words deuteros, second, and protos, first, attributable to unskillful attempts at textual imitation on the part of copyists. This supposition would, of course, render unnecessary all other efforts to unravel the knotty problem. And as a matter of fact, deuteroprotos is omitted by many manuscripts, including Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. To those not feeling inclined to accept this solution, we will suggest the first of the above named explanations as the most natural and probable one, William Barr.
So there is an argument because some manuscripts don't have it. Some do, some don't have it. So we have to, I want to be as fair as possible. But just because something doesn't have some manuscript, and the rule of thumb within academia is that when you have a manuscript that is is less or is I would say shorter the academia world will lean or say this is the original one because they believe things don't get taken away, things get added. And that's kind of like the route they go. But what was going on back then, I could see how people could take away things too. So we don't, it's an argument for both sides, right? So I just want to bring both arguments. So this is from ebible.com. This is another commentary. I just want to go through it just to be fair. What is the consensus on what it is? But I believe the answer is in the Bible. Let's continue reading.
All right. John Appetite. The phrases, the second Sabbath after the first, Luke 6:1, is literally on the second first Sabbath. Greek in Sabbato Deuteropoto. Although missing in some Greek texts, it is found only once here in the New Testament, and so far not found in any Greek literature. However, it must have been understood by the early readers of the gospel.
Right.
Most scholars take it to be the second Sabbath after the Passover, counting towards the Pentecost holiday. One identified it as the first Sabbath of Tishri in the autumn, during which the 24 priestly courses began their second cycle for administrating in the temple. These explanations have problems, but there's a satisfactory solution.
Okay. So, all right. So I wanted to show this real quick because Mia is the word that is used when you hear first of the Sabbath. Mia does not mean first most of the time. It means one, only one, someone, right? It got translated 162 times. First 8 times, although I discovered it was 10, so maybe that could be a typo from the Blue Letter Bible. And certain 4 times, 8 3 times, right? I don't know how many. Okay, the other 1 time, agreed, like we're one. So Mia, I will assume that is the equivalent of the Hebrew word achad. Hear, O Israel, Ahaya Ba'Shem. Hear, O Israel, Ahaya, your Lord, Ahaya is one. Or hear, O Israel, Ahaya, your God, Ahaya is one, or Achad, right? My Hebrew is just, it's been a while, right? So Samaya, Sha'ala, Ahaya, Alahaya, now Ahaya, Achad, right? Achad and Mia is probably the same one, right? Or the same equivalent. I have to look into that. Could be wrong, but that's what I'm assuming, right? So let's look at every single time Mia was used, right? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, but you could find it in two places. In Matthew 24 and 41. So let's read some of them so people can understand what I'm referring to. Mia could be one, the other one, and because I want to go on every single time the word first was being used. So let's continue. Let's read, if you don't mind.
Matthew 5:18. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass away from the law till to be fulfilled. Matthew 5:19. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever
go ahead. I'm sorry, brother. I'm sorry.
But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven.
Okay, jump down to verse the third to last. Matthew 20. Yeah.
Okay. Matthew 20:12, saying, these last have wrought but 1 hour, and thou hast made them equal unto us, which have borne the burden and heat of the day.
And also, this is the reason why I believe Mia is the equivalent of a achad, because Matthew 19:6, wherefore they are no more twine, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder. when you read this in the context of the Old Testament or the writings, that will be achad. So the Sarah means one. So the same word as the Father and Son, achad, you should be one achad with your wife. Same, or one, Mia, right? Let's go down to Matthew 24:41.
2 women shall be grinding at the mill. The one shall be taken and the other left.
So you see to put the other there, but it could also be to put the one. If you read the one shall be taken and the one left, right? It's the same thing, but they translate to make it flow better in the English language. Okay, so you guys get the word one, right? Mia. But these are now, let's see here. Yeah, first, it says it occurred 10 times in the verse of the King James, right? So we could see Matthew 28, Mark 16, Luke 24, Luke 24, John 2019. This is all dealing with the Christ resurrection, right? So we're going to skip those because we read those and we understand that. And then now when you read, now this is my assumption. And that's why I want to go into more studying the Greek. And I want Greek experts to maybe call on the show and maybe we could have a conversation. My theory is you put the word one or you put the word Mia, or you translate the word Mia into the word first when is first in line of something else. It could be the first day of the week, or it's the first Sabbath of 7 Sabbaths. Make sense? So it will have to be, so if you have one car, you would put the word Mia or first when you translate the word Mia. But if you have 3 cars, you say first, second, third, 3 cars. Because it's a line that says, so Mia can become Petros or first when it's in front of others of the same thing. So in the same way when it says that 2 women, let me go back, 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, the first shall be taken and the other left. That could be, be taken, but did that make sense? It's just one of these things that Mia, when it's one, which means one singular, it could be translated as one, but when it's part of several, Mia becomes first because now you got to count first, second, third. So it will make sense to translate Mia first of the Sabbath when you're counting 7 Sabbaths. But what they did cleverly, they put the word they there, which was not in part of the Greek. Now you think it's talking about the first day of the week. It's not talking about for the first day of the week. It's talking about the first Sabbath before the second, before the third. So now you have a better understanding in the time period when Christ was going on the field, which Sabbath he was going to kill in the field, rubbing his hand and eating on the cornfield. It was the second Sabbath after the first Sabbath. What is the first Sabbath? The first Sabbath after the Feast of Passover, as it's understood. Petros or Deutero Petros means the second after the first Sabbath. Makes perfect sense if you just glean on the scriptures. So, and I want to show you something to prove my point. Let's go to Acts 12 and 10. This is the fourth to the last. Acts 12 and 10, right?
When they were past the first and the second ward, they came unto the iron gate that leadeth unto the city, which opened to them.
The word first there is Mia. But it's because it's there, Mia is part of a ranking thing. When they were past the first and the second war. So there was 2, but now there was maybe in rank and order, that could have been in, or it was just the first one they encounter. That makes sense? Let's go to Titus 3 and 10 to show you.
Titus 3 and 10. A man that is a heretic after the first and second admonition reject.
You see that? So I believe that you always put mina, you always translate mia when it's part of a numbering more than one. Mia becomes first when there's more ones, if there's 2 or 3. The problem that the translator did, they added the word one, the word day, and they did not have to because it was not talking about the first day. It was talking about the first Sabbath or first of the Sabbath, as the Jubilee Bible translated. And it makes perfect sense. It doesn't contradict. It makes perfect sense if you understood the idioms of the scriptures. And so let's go into here real quick, right? To kind of strengthen my theory. Let's read the Gospel of Peter that was not added into the scripture because it was found incomplete, and I believe there was some tampering there. There was some tampering within the writings. There's certain words that, from my studies, there's certain words that Peter would not have used during that time. So there was some embellishment. That's why they probably did not deal with it. But just because something is corrupt or is ruined doesn't mean you cannot get knowledge off of it. So let's pick it up it's only one chapter. It was a small book. So in verse 55, 56, and 57, down to 58.
All right. The Gospel of Peter, translated by Raymond Brown. And having gone off, they found the sepulchre open. And having come forward, they bent down there and saw there a certain young man seated in the middle of the sepulchre, calmly and clothed with a splendid robe, who said to them, Why have you come? Whom do you seek? Now that one who was crucified, he is risen and gone away. But if you do not believe, bend down and see the place where he lay, because he is not there. For he is risen and gone away to there whence he was sent. Then the women fled, frightened.
So 58. Now this version is recording what we read in Mark. They left. But let's read verse 58. This changes everything.
Now it was the final day of the unleavened bread.
Uh-oh. What will be the final day of the unleavened bread? If we keeping a Enoch model, we're going to address other models, maybe in another show, but I want to just focus on the Enoch model. And it wouldn't have mattered if you keep a lunar Sabbath, because there is overwhelming evidence, we're going to get into those evidence, that year, the Sabbath or the Passover landed on a Saturday or Friday sundown. So it would make sense that the end of the unleavened bread, which will be the first Sabbath after Passover, which would end up being the next week. I hope everything's making sense here when you all put it all together, because this is when this all went down. Now, it was the final day of the unleavened bread. The final day is a week after the Passover. That will be what? Consider the first Sabbath. And that's why I put a graph. First Sabbath after the feast of Passover, right? Then week 1. That will be week 1. Sabbath 1, Sabbath 2, Sabbath 3, Sabbath 4, Sabbath 5, Sabbath 6, Sabbath 7, feast of what? First fruits. Let's continue reading.
All right. Now it was the final day of the unleavened bread, and many went out returning to their homes since the feast was over. But we 12 disciples of the Lord were weeping and sorrowful, and each one sorrowful because of what had come to pass, departed to his home.
Now remember, and when John records this, right? And John records this, Let me go. When John records this, John 20, and I want to switch over at 19. Okay, yes. So now remember when John records this. Now I'm reading. Let me go to the King James and then go to the Jubilee version, right? John 20. Let me put this a little bigger. Sometimes you just got to freestyle. Can't go always. John 20. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is the same event. But when you read John 20, right, what it says, let's pick it up at verse 18.
All right. Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord and that he had spoken these things unto her. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst and saith unto them, peace be unto you.
See, brother, Christ came upon the first day of the week. So, and if you translate this like the book of Jubilee did, it will make perfect sense because it's not talking about the first day of the week. It's talking about first of the Sabbath. Let's read this version, if you don't mind, brother. Let's go down to verse 18. The same story, but now it reads more accurate, taking away the word day, which is not there. And you only add a word according to the science or according to the formula, the mathematical formula. You only need to add a word when you read it and it doesn't make sense. You have to add a word of, the, after, before. You got to add these words for it to make sense in the English language. You don't have to add a word because it makes perfect sense. Let's pick it up at verse 18, brother. This is
verse
from the
18,
Jubilee Bible.
Mary Magdalene came giving the news to the disciples that I have seen the Lord, and he spoke these things unto me. Then the same day at evening, being the first of the Sabbaths, when the doors were shut, were the disciples assembled for fear of the Jews.
So now you will understand, if you understand what it means, the first of the Sabbath, which is the first Sabbath after the Passover feast, you know, oh, this is a week later. This is not a day and a half later. Yes, man. This is incredible, man. This is all right in the you don't have to add any word. Thank God that God preserved Luke 6:1. Because it all ties. If we would not understand what Luke 6:1 means, we would not understand what the first of the Sabbath means. Because this is the first of the Sabbath. Now the next week, what will be the next week, Brother Ricky? According to
Sabbath.
the second Sabbath from the first. The second from the first. Thank you. We're talking them now. We're giving us a grain time. All this happening within the 7 weeks. And you don't have to go anywhere. You could keep it within the Bible. You could keep it right there within the scriptures. Right? So, let's continue. Okay. Let's go here.
Just one thing, Elder. Yes, just like earlier when we was talking about the calendar and you had brought up Enoch.
Yeah.
I got this complete 54 book Apocrypha, and it got all the different versions in here. So when you go in the second Enoch on page 294, it says this, and I'm just going to go down where it brings up the days of the week, so then y'all can hear it for yourselves. It says, thus I made the expanse steady. This day I call the first created Sunday. So now y'all know the first day of the week is Sunday, like we already knew. And it says in chapter 30, verse 2, then there came evening and there came morning, the fourth day, Wednesday or Wednesday. So all those crazy folks with this Wednesday Sabbath and all the other stuff, that's wicked. Stop it. Chapter 30, verse 7. Then there came evening and there came morning, the fifth day, Thursday or Thursday, for those who in the Nordic. And then when we get up to the ninth verse, it says, and there came evening and there came morning, the sixth day, Friday. And then when you go to chapter 32, the fourth verse, it says, and I bless the seventh day, which is the Sabbath, Saturday, on which he rested from all his works.
Right. Boom. So, and like I said, I looked at all the models and they all could match. But it doesn't matter if you have a lunar calendar or a lunar slash a sun calendar or a full lunar calendar or a Wednesday starting the New Year calendar. And I understand what you're coming from, but I want this channel to kind of be a safe place in regards of like, if we keep in Sabbath and we have a different interpretation, let's not use combative words in regards of like, oh, that's satanic, that's evil. Let's use more, I think you need to look into this. This is part because I think we have to stick together. Now, we could call satanic Sunday worshiper, Christmas, Easter. We're not negotiating with that. We're not coming together with them. We're not, being anywhere friendly with that argument. Like you could be, right, this and that, because they've been lying to you. This is the reason why, I was very passionate, or I used that song, We Need to Stand Together. And because one, what is this? Let me get the song real quick. Here we go. Let's get the song real quick. And I don't want to play too much.
We stand as one. We will not be broken.
So if you keep Sabbath, you're down with us. If you now we could work everything out, right? But let's put a line in the sand. If you keep the 10 Commandments, you're down with us. If you don't, if you change anything, you add or take away, you're not part of our group. You're not down with us. Right? Now, we could work everything else, but we have to put a line in the sand against the Catholics, against the Protestants, against all these Sunday worshipers. They has gone astray, and we could prove it using the scripture that they're wrong. Right? So let's continue. So I asked AI, what the ancient Israelite, how they used to come to work. Is the word Mia Sabbaton is something we even used to use as an expression in regard to the first day of the week. And let's see what it says.
The ancient Israelites counted the days of the week using numbers, with the week beginning on Sunday and ending on Saturday. The days of the week are named after their order in the week, with Rishon meaning first, Shana meaning second, Shlishi meaning third, and so on. The days of the week are.
So that term,
Sunday,
Mia Sabbaton, or Akkad, or will be Hashan, Shabbaton, it's not a word you could find. It's not a phrase. It's not an idiom you could find in describing the first day of the week. The Greek Romans, who claim to be Hebrew experts, got it wrong. It was the first of the Sabbath, which the first of the Sabbath could be understood the first Sabbath after, or the first Sabbath in line of the seventh Sabbath to the Feast of First Fruits, right? Let's read the final verse in the bottom, brother, if you don't mind.
all right. The Israelites' 7-day week is based on the Bible's book of Genesis, which describes God creating the world in 6 days and resting on the seventh. The Jewish tradition counts the day from the beginning of night, when 3 stars are visible, until after sunset the following day. This means that the week actually begins and ends on Saturday evening, with day 1 lasting from Saturday evening to Sunday evening, and Shabbat lasting from Friday evening to Saturday evening.
Right? So I also asked AI, how did the ancient Israelites used to count? The Omar is dealing with the count of the 7th Sabbath. Right? So let's read this as well.
The counting of the Omer is a 50-day biblical tradition that begins on the morning after the Sabbath and involves counting 7 full weeks, or 49 days, up to the day after the 7th Sabbath. The counting period takes place between Passover and Pentecost, starting on the 3rd day, when Yeshua was crucified at Passover. The tradition is based on Leviticus 23:15-16, which states, from the day after the Sabbath, from the day when you bring the Omer of the waving, count off 7 full weeks. Count off 50 days up to the day after the 7th Sabbath. The tradition also includes presenting a new grain offering to the Lord on the day after the 7th Sabbath. People may use various tools to keep track of the Omer, such as decorative boxes, have an interior scroll that shows the daily count through a small opening. Posters and magnets have a tear-off piece of paper for each day's count. Calendars have all 7 weeks and 49 days depicted, with a pointer that moves from day to day. Pegboards keep track of both the day and the week of the Omer.
So, calendar having all 7 weeks. So, the first of the Sabbath is a no-brainer. It's talking about what? The first Sabbath after the feast of the Passover. Like I mentioned earlier, this has been the thorn of many Christians. There's been the biggest problem with many modern Christians dealing with the 3 days and 3 nights for the Sunday resurrection. This is a bigger problem. You cannot get 3 days and 3 nights, right? We all understand that Christ says, for as was Jonah 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. They can't get away from that. This has been the biggest thorn in their side. So if we don't push the crucifixion day back and we keep it on Friday sundown, as all the evidence shows, we got them. So let's go into this gentleman here. He put together a graph in regards of when Christ was crucified. What's the best evidence in regards of Christ when he was crucified, right? So let's read some of his paperwork. And I'm going to put, well, you could get the title here, right? Jewish calendar and the lunar eclipse and the date of Christ's crucifixion, right? And you can look them up, and then it will come up, and you just put that title, and then just put PDF, and it will come up, and it will give you all the sources there. So let's read the summary real quick.
All right. The Jewish calendar, a lunar eclipse, and the date of Christ's crucifixion. Colin J. Humphreys and W.G. Waddington. Summary. Astronomical calculations have been used to reconstruct the Jewish calendar in the 1st century AD and to date a lunar eclipse that biblically and other references suggest followed the crucifixion. The evidence points to Friday, the 3rd April AD 33 as the date of the crucifixion. This was Nisan 14 in the official Jewish calendar. Thus, Christ died at precisely the time when the Passover lambs were slain. The date 3rd April AD 33 is consistent with the evidence for the start of Jesus' ministry with the gospel reference to 46 years to build the temple and with the symbolism of Christ as our Passover lamb. The mention of a solar eclipse at the crucifixion in some texts of Luke is discussed and explained. A new chronology of the life of Christ is suggested.
Okay. Okay. Next page.
All right. There are three main places of the biblical evidence for dating the crucifixion. One, Jesus was crucified when Pontius Pilate was procurator of Judea during AD 26 to 36. All four Gospels, also Tacitus and 1544. Two, all four Gospels agree that Jesus died a few hours before the commencement of the Jewish Sabbath. That is, he died before nightfall on a Friday. In addition, the earliest writings that explicitly state the date of the crucifixion all have it as a Friday. Three, Slakia. All four Gospels agree to within about a day. See below that the crucifixion was at the time of Passover. In the official festival calendar of Judea, as used by the priest of the temple, Passover time was specified precisely. The slaughtering of the lambs for Passover occurred between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. on the 14th day of the Jewish month Nisan. The Passover meal commenced at sunset that evening, that is the start of Nisan 15, the Jewish day running from evening to evening. Leviticus 23 and 5, Numbers 28:16. There is, however, an apparent discrepancy of one day in the gospel accounts of the many scholars' purposes that the Last Supper described by the synoptics was not a strict Passover meal. It suggested that Jesus, knowing of
And I'm
his
sorry to
imminent...
interrupt. I think I skip a page, but this is a summary because of the controversy, because he does address, because in the Synoptic Bible, which is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we have the story of the two disciples telling Christ, where are we going to keep the Passover? And he said, go to a village. You're going to see a man with a pitcher of water. He's going to take it to an upper chamber there where I will keep my Passover with you. And John, it says that the Passover was Saturday. So this is what is believed, what experts are saying, or what is how to harmonize both. So let's continue reading.
It suggested that Jesus, knowing of his imminent arrest, held a Passover-like meal on the evening before Passover. See Luke 22 and 15. Supporters of this interpretation note that the synoptics make no mention of a Passover lamb being slain and roasted for the Last Supper. This interpretation is in broad agreement with the Johannine account, in which the farewell meal is explicitly stated to have occurred before the Feast of Passover, John 13 and 1. The timing also agrees, so that on this theory, all four Gospels will give Nisan 14 as the crucifixion date. A number of variations on this basic interpretation exist. See, A. Hubert has proposed that the Last Supper reported by the synoptics was a strict Passover meal, but held at a Passover time as calculated according to the sectarian calendar of the Qumran community and others.
So remember you was mentioning that the Qumran cave has a different calendar, kind of, and so forth, so on. It's like the Enoch calendar, but it starts on Wednesday. The New Year is like a different. Some people propose that could probably have been the calendar that Christ kept. I'm not saying that that's what he did, but there's an argument there. So I just want to kind of bring what is out there, but all the evidence, the strongest evidence, points to Friday the 13th, going into the 14th. Right? So let's continue reading.
All right. According to this theory, the Last Supper was held on the Tuesday evening, That is, at the start of the Jewish Wednesday, the sectarian calendar Passover day, recorded by the Synoptics. The crucifixion was on Friday, all four Gospels, and the official Passover was on Saturday, recorded by John. According to this theory, all four Gospels, next page, again give Nisan 14 official calendar as the crucifixion date.
So even if you argue which calendar Christ was keeping, because today that's not the argument I want to attack. I want to attack when he was crucified. All evidence points to Friday. That makes sense? And that's, if we could all agree on that, we could stand as one to say he was crucified on Friday, we could kill this Sunday worship, crucifixion, resurrection nonsense. Right?
Right.
Let's continue reading.
Some scholars thus believe that all four Gospels place the crucifixion on Friday, Nisan 14, while others believe that, according to the Synoptics, it occurred on Friday, Nisan 15. At this stage, for the sake of discussion, we assume that both dates may be possible. The problem that then has to be solved is determining in which of the years AD 26 to 36, the 14th and 15th Nisan fell on a Friday. As it is well known, various authors have attempted to use astronomy to provide a solution to this problem. This is not straightforward, however, since although astronomical calculations can accurately specify the times of the new and full moons, we do not know with what skill the Jews of the first century could detect the first faintly glowing lunar crescent following conjunction with the sun, the new moon itself being invisible, of course.
Right. So that's a problem because we do not know what was the what calendar method were the Jews using during the time of Christ. But we do know that his crucifixion, or the evidence point that it was a Friday. So we could start there, and we do know that all the evidence is that although Christ kept a separate Passover, there was a official Passover or a national Passover on Saturday, lining up with the Enoch calendar. And this is my theory. I believe at that time, many Jews had multiple calendars, but this is what I believe. This is my theory. I can't prove it. I'm doing some research on it, that year, the acceptable year of the Lord, all the calendar mashed, landed on the same day. Because you could have a lunar calendar, and it will land, the Passover will land in the same way with the Enoch calendar lands. I think that happened a few years ago. So I believe God put it all together so he could have all the Jews that keep all the calendars come in Jerusalem and see the miracle of the Messiah. I believe all of that is connected, man. But that's a different conversation, different lesson. But I just want to just focus on that. All the evidence point that he was crucified on Friday, right? Let's continue. All right. Secular history, right? Or secular sources of regard showing that he was crucified on Friday as well. These are enemies of Christ. These are not people that want to lie on Christ. They want, lie in the behalf of Christ or to make Christ look good. They're going to try to make Christ look as bad as possible. This is Jesus in the Talmud, right? And these are different. Sanhedrin 43 AB. On the eve of the Passover, they hanged Jesus of Nazareth. Another segment, on the eve of the Passover, they hanged, name is erased. On Sabbath eve and the eve of Passover, they hanged Jesus of Nazareth. It's mixing both. So these are people that don't like Christ, right? On the eve of the Passover, they hanged Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth. On the eve of the Passover. So it was that year. That's why in the book of John says, for that Sabbath was a high Sabbath, because that year is when we keep the Passover and the weekly Shabbat on the same day. So it became a high Sabbath. So I just want to also use this. You can get this on Wikipedia. Very easy to actually just put Jesus on the Talmud, and it gives you all the time where you can find these when they mention Jesus or Christ, Yeshua, the Messiah, right? Okay, biblical evidence, right? All the time that is mentioned when they took Christ from the cross on the day of preparation. Now, the next day that followed the day of preparation, which is the next after, the chief priests and the Pharisees came unto Pilate. Mark 15:42. And now when the evening was come, because it was the preparation that is the day before the Sabbath. So we could disagree or argue about the calendar later, but we could all agree that Christ was buried and crucified on Friday sundown. Right? And I put this chart together. This is what I believe went down. So we start at New Year's. Nisan, day 1, right? Then Sabbath. Then you have week 2, day 1. Then you have Nisan, right? Nisan 13 going into 14. That's when the Christ was crucified. Christ in the belly of the earth, one day 1, belly of the earth, Sabbath. 14, he got buried on Friday, sundown 14 to 15, that's day 1. Day 2, in the belly of the earth, that's when the priest was waving the sheaf. After tomorrow, when you wave the sheaf. Day 3, which would be considered Monday, or you consider Sunday evening. So you got Friday evening, Friday night to Saturday night, that's 1 day. Saturday night to Sunday night, that's 3 days. Sunday night to Monday night, that's 2 days. Saturday night to Friday, let me start again. Friday night to Saturday night, 1 day. Saturday night to Sunday night, that's 2 days. Sunday night to Monday night, that's 3 days, 3 nights. What happens on Monday in Israelite tradition? We partake on the first fruit of the earth. Let me prove it. Right? And then the next week, right, the first Sabbath after the Passover, the end of unleavened bread. And I also mentioned in the bottom there, Luke 1:16, that's when the second Sabbath after the first. The first of what? All the experts agreed, or the majority of them agree, that the second Sabbath after the first is a Sabbath after the first Sabbath after Passover. Let me prove it. Josephus, right? You see when it says, but on the second day of unleavened bread, do you read that, brother? You see that?
Yeah, I see it in the middle.
Okay, let's read that, if you don't mind, brother.
All right. But on the second day of unleavened bread, which is the 16th day of the month, they first partake of the fruits of the earth. For before that day, they do not touch them. And while they suppose it proper to honor God, from whom they obtain this plentiful provision, in the first place, they offer the first fruits of their barley.
The first fruit of their barley. Keep that in mind. On the 16th day of Nisan, which will be Monday, not Sunday, right? Keep that in mind. Keep reading, brother. I'm sorry.
And that in the manner following, they take a handful of the ears and dry them, then beat them small and purge the barley from the bran. They then bring 1/10 deal to the altar to God, and casting one handful of it upon the fire, they leave the rest for the use of the priests. And after this, it is that they may publicly or privately reap their harvest. They also, at this participation of the first fruits of the earth, sacrifice a lamb as a burnt offering to God.
So that's what they do. Will be Monday. Well, they weigh the sheep on Sunday, which is a feast of unleavened bread, or the beginning, the first day of the feast of unleavened bread. But on the second day, which will be Monday, that's when they could eat the first fruits of the earth. Prior to that, they only eat the old corn or the old fruit, right? Let me prove that, right? Joshua chapter 5, verse 11 and 12. Let's read that, brother, if you don't mind.
All right. Josh 5 and 11. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the self same day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna anymore, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year.
Right? So verse 11, and they did eat the old corn of the land on the morrow after what? The Passover, as Josephus understood, after that feast / leavened cakes or leavened bread, right? So now we have a complete understanding of these scriptures. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 20. Let's read, brother, if you don't mind.
All right. 1 Corinthians 15 to 20. But now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that sleep. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. But every man in his own order. Christ the first fruits, afterwards they are that are Christ at his coming.
At his coming, right? Revelation 14:4. Read that, brother, if you don't mind.
These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb.
And to the Lamb. So let's have a conversation. Let's see if there is any, I would say, blind spots, something I miss. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Like I said, if you could keep Sabbath, you could criticize my presentation as much as you want. I put the link below. Anybody wants to come in and have a conversation, you're more than welcome. But this is what I believe is the true understanding of what went down with Christ's passion, death, and resurrection. He was crucified on Friday night or Friday evening. He was on the belly of the earth starting Friday until Saturday, Saturday until Sunday, Sunday until Monday, which is the tradition, the law, the Torah, the teaching, the beautiful laws of God that we begin to eat part of the new corn or the first fruits or the new fruits in that on the 16th of Nisan or the second day of unleavened bread. And these worshipers of Satan, these Sunday worshipers, ruined that story, which it could have been clearly explained in the Torah, in the teachings, in the gospel, by wanting to push the day of his resurrection a day earlier because they want to worship this sun god, this tradition that they were keeping before they converted to Christianity, and they created their own pagan Christianity. And we have to expose these bastards for what they really are. And I want to show a video real quick. I'm going to show a video because it even, people that are of the Gentile prescription are waking up to this lie that they've been teaching us, right? Fair use.
There are 7 Sabbaths that are counted leading up to the feast known as the Feast of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came down in the book of Acts, and also where the Torah was originally given in the time of Moses. And what I find interesting about the counting of the Omer is the phrase that we see over and over and over again in our New Testament regarding the disciples meeting on the first day of the week. is that really true? Were they all meeting on Sunday? I think not. There was a blog that I did a while back called Satan Sabotaging the Sabbaton. And you can check that out at babylonrisingblog.com/Sabbaton.html. And Sabbaton is spelled Sabbaton. Sabbaton. I'm going to put the link in the chat room if you're interested in checking that out. Because as I started doing Sabbath, keeping Sabbath, so my well-meaning Christian brothers and sisters started coming after me and saying, oh, Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath, which of course is true. And we meet on Sunday, we don't meet on Saturday anymore. Sunday effectively replaced Saturday as the new Sabbath, so to speak. And they would often point to scriptures like Acts 20, verse 7, which we'll get to in a minute. But when they were doing that and challenging me on these things, I'm like, I'm really thinking, God made a point. That's the only commandment of the 10 Commandments. He says, remember. He didn't say forget or change or wait till my son shows up and I'll, switch it to another day. He said, no, this is the day, the seventh day is the day of rest from the time of creation and forever. It is the day that Yahuwah himself set apart as the sanctified, holy Sabbath or day of rest. And it was to be forever, perpetual, in your generations, over and over and over again. We see that it's everlasting, not that it was going to change.
And I put the link.
And so I decided to look up.
I put the link for people who want to see the video. It's 14. I don't want to play the whole thing, but it's titled First Day of the Week or First of the Sabbaths, right? Like I mentioned, fair use.
Up Acts 20, verse 7, and I looked at my trusty King James Study Bible and saw that the word day was in italics. And I thought, because I know that whenever I see the italicized words, that's where the translator in.
So even the Christians now are waking up to this lie. Let me play this video, fair use.
Shalom, everyone. We have truly inherited the lies of our fathers. In Acts 20 and 7, it says it was on the first day of the week when the disciples came together to break bread. When you read that, you would assume that means it was Sunday when the disciples came together to break bread. When you go into the original text, when you look at the original Greek in the Septuagint and in the Textus Receptus, it doesn't say that it was the first day of the week. It says it was miaton sabbaton. And mia, only usage of mia is one. If there's a group of things and I say, give me one of those, I wouldn't say, give me first of those. I would say, give me one of those. So the only usage for mia is one. Ton means of the, and sabbaton means the Sabbath. So it was one of the Sabbaths that they came together to break bread. Well, what do they mean, one of the Sabbaths? You have to understand the verse right above it, Acts 20 and 6. It says, but we sailed from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. And in 5 days joined them at Troas, where we stayed 7 days. See, after the days of unleavened bread, unleavened bread starts on the 15th day of the first month. The 14th day of the first month is the Passover, the sacrifice, when Yeshua was crucified. The 15th day of the first month begins unleavened bread, and for 7 days you eat the unleavened bread. The first day of the week after the Passover, that first Sunday, you begin the counting of the Omer, the 7 Sabbaths. Israel was required to count out 7 Sabbaths. And then that's 49 days. On the 50th day, of course, is Pentecost. And so what Paul is saying here is he says it was after the days of unleavened bread when we sailed away from Philippi to Troas, and where we came in 5 days, we stayed for 7 days, and it was on one of those 7 Sabbaths when we came together to break bread that Paul preached to them, and he preached until midnight because he was leaving the next day. Where was he going? He told you in Acts 18 and 21, he says, I must by all means get to Jerusalem so I can keep the feast of Pentecost. So just want to rightly divide that word. If you ask the church, where did it say that they came together on Sunday? They'll always point to this scripture, but this scripture is grossly mistranslated, and you have been misled. So shalom.
So there it is. So even the Gentiles are waking up. That's why we have to have a movement of Sabbath keepers, and we draw a line against Sunday keepers, and we will attack them with righteousness, with love, but we expose their lies, we expose their so-called experts, we expose them for being biased towards this specific day that the Romans just made up. The variable son of the variable day of the sun, as they used to call it, right? Wanted to conform the beautiful teachings and Torah and laws and commandments of God and traditions of God to their pagan holidays. So we're waking up, and I hope this lesson finds everybody in good spirits. I hope this lesson is edifying. If I got something that you disagree, please, I want this to be a safe place. This is my story. I'm sticking to it, but I'm open to be corrected if there's something I'm missing, if there's something I got wrong. But I believe all of it could be answered right in the scriptures. With the second Sabbath after the first, now we have the second. What is the first Sabbath? Before the second. What is that day? And when you look at the pattern, every single time that term Mia Sabbatum is mentioned between Passover and Pentecost, counting the weeks, it was on the first week. Excuse me, the first week, I could take that. The first Sabbath after the second, before the second Sabbath. What is the second Sabbath? It's the second before the first. The third Sabbath, fourth, fifth, sixth day of first fruits. But you partake, because really the feast, the whole thing is 7 weeks. But you start partaking on eating. You gather all the new food, the new grain. On this 15th day, you wave the sheaf, which is the beginning of the unleavened bread. But you start eating the new corn, the new wheat, on the 16th day, the same day Christ was risen. And if we could break it down, just like I said, I went outside the Bible, but you could explain it within the Bible, within the actual scriptures. And you would throw this Sunday worship right out the window. Okay, so Brother Ricky, anything you want to add before we end the show?
Yes, just a couple of things. A lot of people grew up in church, and we got all these colloquial sayings like, when God said, that settles it. And if we live by these colloquial sayings, then at the beginning of the day, we're supposed to follow the Most High God, and He has laws, statutes, and commandments. And so when we need to go into the scriptures, we need to understand that what the Most High is trying to say. So I got a couple of scriptures I wanted to read off before getting off. Psalms 96, 4 and 5, it says, "For the Lord is great and greatly to be praised. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens." Now, why did I bring that scripture up? Well, for one, Israel, because of our disobedience, we went into several, not 1, 2, or 3. We went into several different captivities. By going into those different captivities, we became under the hedge of our captors. So just like when we went into with Nebuchadnezzar, he changed the names to the real name wasn't Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It really had those names for whatever language they spoke. So understands that when we sit up here dealing with these other nations and stuff that they're doing, we're following their gods. Now remember, the Most High God said He's a jealous God. So if we're listening to nonsense versus what the Word of God is saying, we're doing the opposite of what the Most High say do. Now I'm gonna go to John 14 and 15. Brother Logic brought this up last week. He said, "If you love me, keep my commandments. He that have my commandments and keepeth them, he that it is that loveth me. And he that loveth me shall be loved of my Father, and I will love him and will manifest myself to him."
Yeah.
So when people are saying that they're having problems not understanding the scriptures and they can't understand this, that, and the other, you got to ask yourself, let's go back to the basics. Are you following the law, statutes, and commandments? Are you eating right? If you're putting defiled meat in your body, then it won't like in the scripture it says, don't be grievous towards the Holy Spirit. So if you intentionally eating unclean meats, your brain and your body ain't gonna work right. So therefore the Holy Spirit can't really work with you because you need to get that filthiness up out of you. And that goes for any other thing that we may be breaking that's within the law. And then when we go to 1 John 5, 1-4, it says, whosoever believeth that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and everyone that loveth him that begat loveth him also that is begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world, and this victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. Now I bring that up because of this, because the world teaches us to celebrate on a Sunday, and they tell us, hey, go to the football game, go shopping, go do all kind of things, do what you want, do it thy wilt on a Saturday, when the Most High God on the fourth day said, remember to keep the Sabbath day holy, because guess what? When Adam fell, the earth was given to the hands of the wicked, and Satan already knew us from then. If he know Adam, he know all of us. So therefore he knew how to play the trick over and over and over again. But at the same time, the Most High God said in end times, knowledge shall increase. Therefore, we got to take this knowledge seriously and take heed to it. Now, by being grounded in the Most High, that is how you get the secrets that are meant for you to learn. And I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, thank you, brother, for your wisdom. And I just want to thank everybody for, giving me an opportunity to kind of explain and fill in the gaps where we are maybe be debating. And like I said, I didn't want to attack the calendar today. I didn't want to argue about that today, because I believe all calendar models can fit in this model. If we all agree that Christ was crucified on that Friday, then we could start there. And then all the models, all the calendars could fit around that model, which is fine. It doesn't contradict Christ being crucified on that Friday. And then we could finally destroy the illusion, the sorcery that they have put upon millions and even billions of people, particular Christians. Remember, Christ says, when the disciples asked him, what will be the sign of your coming in the end of the world? The first thing he told them and said, take heed that no man deceive you, for many will come in my name and will deceive many. So I hope this you enjoyed this Sabbath lesson, this conversation. The Sabbath's about to be over, or it's really over. The sun is down, and I just want to encourage everybody to continue the good fight, to continue to searching the truth and searching what the Bible is giving you, because I believe the Bible is there. The truth is there. The truth could be, you don't need anything else to understand the Bible. Yes, you got to study the idioms. You have to study the different type of sayings to understand what the Hebrews meant when there's certain phrases were being said, like Mia Sabbaton. What does that mean? All the evidence pointed, it was talking about the first Sabbath after the Passover feast, then noting that it was not on the first day. It was actually on the second day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the 16th of Nisan, fulfilling and completing the 3 days and 3 nights. And Christ symbolically being the first fruits of all creatures, right? So I truly believe we got something here. If we could all be united in this breakdown, we could destroy the Sunday worship breakdown, because all the Protestant Catholics and all of them, Lutherans, Pentecostal, they're all united on their breakdown, on their understanding. If this could be the universal breakdown, I think we could be united in this one thing. I hope the Most High keep you and watch you and bless you. And remember, Christ is King. Shalom.